But now Harry's decided that apparently that's not what they meant at all.
In the Oprah interview, you accuse members of your family of racism. You don't even...
No, we didn't.
Well,
the British press said that.
Right.
Did Meghan ever mention that they were racist?
She said there were troubling comments about
There was concern about his skin colour.
Right. Wouldn't you describe that as essentially racist?
I wouldn't, not having lived within that family. The way the British press reacted to that was fairly typical. Neither of us believe that that comment or that experience or that opinion was based in racism.
I would like to apologise on behalf of the British press, actually, because he is an unbelievable village idiot, and I think it's all our fault. Honestly, it's not the fact that he was useless at school and got no qualifications, which is why he's doing all this stupid stuff. It's the British press's fault. We're responsible for everything, including his ginger hair. And I'd like to apologise for giving him ginger hair. It's awful. We should never have done it. But let me get this straight on a serious point. The racist British press blamed for 6 hours straight of that Netflix bilge for hounding Meghan out of our racist country, driven at the top by a racist royal family. Apparently, it's the press that's to blame for saying that Meghan Markle's claims of racism were claims of racism. Now, this had consequences, what they said to Oprah Winfrey. I was forced out of my last job presenting Good Morning Britain, a job I really enjoyed, because I said I didn't believe these claims without firm evidence. There wasn't any. And now we get told it wasn't racism. Exactly is what I suspected at the time. Do I get an apology? Does Sharon Osbourne, one of my guests tonight, does she get restored to her job at the CBS show, The Talk? Because she got fired for offering support on Twitter for my right to my opinion, because apparently I'd said racist things. It turned out those racist things were not believing Meghan Markle's racism claims. Now they say they didn't mean racism. So does Sharon get her job back? Will they give back that award that they got for their heroic battle against structural racism in the royal family? Now we know there was no racism, structural or otherwise. Across 3 new interviews and 416 whining pages of his book, Spare Me, as I call it, Harry lambasts the British press and his family for colluding with the British press. His bitterness and bile for Camilla, the Queen Consort, is shocking. This is the love of his father's life, who he brands a dangerous villain.
How was she dangerous?
Because of the need for her to rehabilitate her image.
That made her dangerous?
That made her dangerous because of the connections that she was forging within the British press. And there was open willingness on both sides to trade of information. And with a family built on hierarchy, and with her on the way to being Queen Consort, there was going to be people or bodies left in the street because of that.
Bodies left in the street, says the guy who boasted about killing 25 Taliban. Actual bodies that he left in the street. And then boasted about it, which has now enraged the entire Muslim world. But Camilla was apparently dangerous because she forged relationships with the media, says the man who's pocketed over $100 million by forging relationships with media entities like Netflix, Spotify, Oprah Winfrey, James Corden, CBS, ABC, and so it goes on. He says his brother, the Prince of Wales, attacked him because he was riled by reading stories in the tabloids, but also that his brother placed those stories in the tabloids himself. He slams a memoir by Diana's butler, Paul Burrell, as one man's self-justifying, self-centering version of events. My God, the irony of this! From a man who's literally just produced the single most self-justifying, self-centering version of events imaginable. And if we want any more evidence of Harry's complete loss of self-awareness and utter delusion, it's surely in that claim that the book was never intended to do any harm or hurt to his family.
You said you want your father and brother back. Do you think that this book is going to bring them back, or are they going to further divide you?
I have thought about it long and hard, and as far as I see it, the divide couldn't be greater before this book. But I genuinely believe that if me and my family can reconcile, can put our differences behind us, but first there needs to be conversation and accountability. And if that doesn't happen, then that's very sad.
Compensation and accountability. Is that a joke? Is that a joke? You're the one doing all the attacking. You're the bully. You're the one trashing your family in public, not the family that stayed silent throughout this onslaught that's been going on now for several years. What's sad, Harry, is your public self-destruction and the remorseless way you've savaged your own loved ones to airbrush yourself. Please don't make my final days a misery, King Charles said to Harry after Prince Philip's memorial. We know that because Harry's told us. He's revealed that most excruciatingly private conversation with his father, our new king. Imagine what he would have said if a tabloid newspaper had revealed that conversation. It's disgusting. How dare you invade my family's privacy? This proves what I say about you all. You're revolting. Yeah, maybe. But what does it make you now you've done exactly the same thing that you've been ranting about for years? Harry and Meghan, let's be clear, have sold their royal souls for a life as reality stars, trading every private cough and splutter for cash. The royal family has said nothing about this volley of abuse. It's maintained a dignified silence, which I think is the correct response. Because without the royal gravitas, without the titles, Harry and Meghan, well, what are they? They're just another version of the Kardashians. They've gone for broke with this latest instalment of The Only Way is Sussex, but we might finally be closing in, hopefully, on the final episode. Well, joining me in the studio is Talk TV presenters Sharon Osbourne, Vanity Fair royal editor Katie Nicholl, from New York, Talk TV's Trisha Goddard, and Princess Diana's former butler, Paul Burrell. So a stellar lineup to discuss all this. Paul Burrell, let me start with you. You, like most people, get a kicking in the book. He dismisses you as self-serving, writing a book just to put one side of the point of view. I mean, I had to laugh when I read that. This is by a guy who's literally just done exactly that.
Yes, but Piers, you knew my story. At the time, I was being trashed by everyone, and I went to the highest court in the land, and I had to survive. I had to feed my family. Everything I had was taken away from me. Harry's in a totally different position. He's an angry, petulant, privileged prince who constantly blames others with no accountability on his part. His mother would be absolutely appalled by, don't only undermine himself, he's undermining his country, his family, the institution, which is the monarchy, which his mother was very proud of. It beggars belief. I don't recognize the young man that I grew up with. I don't recognize that man anymore. I just don't know what's happened to him. I think he's lost the plot completely, Piers. This book shouldn't be called Spare, it should be called Blame, because he's blaming everybody else but himself. Yeah,
I completely agree. And also, I've never seen an unhappier looking person who constantly tells us how happy he is. This is not a happy man. He's bitter, bitter, bitter.
No.
And there seems to be no end to the bitterness.
Yes. No, and you have to remember, our dear late Queen had to suffer this too before she died, because she also watched the Oprah Winfrey interview and thought, what on earth is happening here? Why didn't Harry come and talk to me about this? So she went to her grave, actually not knowing the truth, with great distress, which Harry compounded in her final days of her life.
Well, I honestly think the Queen will be turning in her grave, reading all this stuff and reading the fallout, because not only did that Oprah Winfrey interview air literally a couple of days after Philip was taken to hospital, and as we later know, died within several months, but the book has now come out within 3 months of the Queen dying. And there is his response to the death of our great monarch, is within 3 months to do a book which causes severe damage to the institution that she represented so magnificently for over 70 years.
I totally agree. And Piers, you remember those boys growing up. You saw them grow up. You came to Kensington Palace. Now, in those days, Diana always had the final word. So I'm going to leave you with my words, which I think Diana would be saying right now. She'd be saying to Harry, jumping up and down, wanting to be noticed. Shh, Harry, be quiet.
Yeah, you do wonder who on earth is having that conversation with him. Well, let's go to Trisha Goddard. So, Trisha, you were there on Good Morning Britain on the day, the morning after the Oprah Winfrey interview aired. We had a pretty lively series of exchanges on that show. As you know, I left Good Morning Britain the next day because I was asked to apologise for disbelieving her claims of racism. I said I wanted to see evidence of this so-called racism. We now learn from Harry's own mouth that they did not call the royal family racist after all. So I'm not quite sure why I had to leave my job. Are you?
Yes.
Well, go on. Why?
Because they actually didn't use the words racist.
Oh, please.
And would you like me to finish?
No, I'll tell you what I want to do, Trisha. Before you go any further, I want to play you what they said on Oprah. Then you can repeat what you've just said. Let's watch this.
Okay.
And also concerns and conversations about how dark his skin might be when he's born.
What? About how dark your baby is going to be?
Potentially, and what that would mean or look like.
What was that conversation?
That conversation I'm never going to share. But at the time it was awkward. I was a bit shocked.
Yeah, and the end of that first clip with Meghan Markle goes on to say that if the baby was too dark, that would be a problem. Yes, you may think that. So that I'm afraid, Trisha, that is racism.
Hang on just a minute.
The charge is... Let me finish my question. Let me finish my question. The charge was racism against the royal family. At the time, they produced no evidence. Her version of events was nearly 2 years after Harry's timeline for when this happened. They've never named the royal member who said this stuff. And now we get told casually it's not racism.
All right, can you just play that again? Because there must be something wrong at my line. I didn't hear either Harry or Meghan use the word racism. I heard you use it. I saw the press use it. I didn't actually hear them use the word. And that's when we had that robust exchange of words, I think what I said to you is that I do get fed up with other people labelling, white people, labelling what is and isn't racist to black people. Now, if they'd actually used the word racism, I would be agreeing.
Trish. Honestly, this is utterly ridiculous.
So what is racism?
She was asked I'll tell you what racism is. I'll tell you what racism is.
Oh, good. Hang on,
I know I'm white.
Let me get comfortable.
I know
let me get comfortable.
I know I'm white.
Piers Morgan's about to lecture a black woman about racism.
No, I'm about to tell you.
Racism.
I'm about to give you an example of racism as a middle-aged white man who I know is the enemy to you.
You know,
let me tell you what an example of racism is. An example of racism would be somebody expressing concern about the skin colour of a baby from a mixed-race marriage, and when the interviewer then says, "What if it was darker?" That would be a problem. Yes, you may think that. That is an example of somebody expressing racism. And that became the headline and narrative for the next 2 years after the interview. And for you to shamelessly sit there and pretend that wasn't what they meant is utter bilge.
If there were more black people in the media, in the tabloid media, they may have had the opportunity to look into that and explain it a little bit more. I didn't see it as racism. I saw it, and that's why I got cross when you decided to label it
I didn't decide to do anything.
When we were having
they literally confirmed to Oprah Winfrey that a member of the royal family had expressed concern about the skin colour of their baby, and if the baby's skin colour was too dark, that would be a problem.
When a black person attempts to talk about this in other than headline news, when I'm trying to have a reasoned conversation, I get shouted over. Why is my experience, or what black people experience, why do we have no currency? Why am I not allowed to explain
They've literally had front-page headlines about the racist royal family for 2 years. How much more currency does Meghan Markle want?
no one has called the royal family racist. I mean,
for God's sake, honestly, this is ridiculous.
I would say it's built on the Commonwealth, and we already know Charles has had problems. You know, they've talked about the crown that Camilla may or may not use because the history of one of the diamonds, the Koh-i-Noor diamonds, and what have you. We know that the royalty and many royal families around the world were built on the backs of slavery, racism, Commonwealth countries having goods stolen or taken away from them. We know that. Unfortunately, it's not taught in schools.
Sorry, that's got
so
nothing
people
to
are
do.
Ignorant of
Sorry,
that.
yeah, but with respect, Tricia, that has nothing to do.
The history is racist.
Yeah, you can't just speak endlessly without me jumping in. Sorry. With great respect to you, you can't just keep talking. I'm allowed to ask questions. It's an interview. Right, my question for you
but
is...
you're not allowed to make statements without listening to what somebody says.
Meghan Markle made a direct charge, supported by her husband, that a member of the royal family had expressed concern about the potential skin colour of their baby, which, if it was too dark, would be a problem. That is racism. They made a charge... Yes, that's called racism, If you think that if a baby's too dark, it's a problem... That's called racism. Sorry to have to lecture you about racism. I know I'm not allowed to as a white man, but actually that is an example of racism.
Everything. Tell us about my history. Tell us about the history of black people and what's
that got to do with what they said?
Because they didn't say it was racism.
Yes, they did.
Somebody else used that word. They stepped aside from using that word, I think, very deliberately.
Why did they win an award?
Tell us about unconscious.
All right.
Tell us about unconscious bias.
I'll tell you about unconscious delusion, which is they won an award.
No bias. What does it mean?
I do the questions, you do the answering. It's called an interview show, right? Just before Christmas, they accepted an award for their heroic stand against the structural racism of this royal family, based on what they told Oprah Winfrey. That was all a complete lie. There was no racism, we now know. They never meant to say it was racism. You're supporting them. That was never meant to be racism. Queering the colour of a baby from a mixed-race marriage and expressing concern if it was going to be too dark. It's not racism. Trish, you take me for a complete mug. It couldn't be a clearer example of racism. Why deny that?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, so am I right in thinking that you know better than you? I have no idea of what racism is.
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I said to you very clearly.
Sorry, that you are more.
What you keep doing,
learned.
Tricia, what you keep doing, you keep putting words into my mouth I'm not actually saying, and the viewers aren't stupid.
Well, that's
can hear
what
the
people
conversation.
did with them. They didn't use racism.
You want people to believe that actually what she said, Meghan Markle, to Oprah Winfrey, supported by Harry, does not constitute racism. And I'm afraid everyone watching this will think you are being deliberately either delusional or disingenuous. Which one is it?
You haven't explained what you understand by unconscious bias, so I'm not quite sure you understand.
You're not doing the interview, I am. No, I don't care, sorry. We've now moved from racism to unconscious bias, right?
Yes.
I would like to move to unconscious or conscious delusion. Right, because we all know what she said to Oprah Winfrey. We all know that for the last 2 years, the royal family has been reeling from the charge of being racist because one of their senior members expressed concern over the skin colour of their unborn baby. And now we get told casually by Harry, clearly feeling a bit of remorse about what's gone down here, because I read the whole book today. This story doesn't appear in the book. This allegation of racism isn't in there. Why? Where's it gone?
Why?
Nor is the allegation where Meghan Markle, which is the other thing I queried at the time before I had to leave the building. I also said, where is the proof that she went to somebody at Buckingham Palace about her suicidal thoughts and was told she couldn't get help? That's not in the book either. Where's that gone? And by the way, what happened to him at the same time when his brother allegedly attacked him? He called his therapist who was on speed dial. Why couldn't he do that for his wife?